360-degree imaging is part of everyday life, and Circle Optics technology is being designed to accelerate the delivery of life-saving resources, ensure aerospace safety, enhance surveillance capabilities for protection, and increase immersive experiences. Our podcast, 360 Pulse, is dedicated to featuring immersive technology, deep tech, and the innovators that are working on these capabilities. I'm very happy today to introduce you to a technologist and a friend of mine, Yael Swerdlow, a Los Angeles native and seasoned freelance photojournalist who's contributed to Pulitzer Prize-winning coverage for major outlets like the United Press International, the Associated Press, and the Los Angeles Times. And she's also worked internationally to document medical relief efforts in war-torn regions. Besides her journalistic achievements, she's also made a mark in the entertainment industry by writing the script for the best-selling video game, True Crime, Streets of LA. One of the reasons why she's on 360 Pulse is because she's also the CEO and founder of Maestro Games. This month is International Women's History Month, and we wanted to have her on as well because she's the co-founder of the Women's Empowerment Foundation and a board member of the International Citizens Diplomacy of Los Angeles and a board member of the humanitarian organization Shelters for Israel. Yael also serves on the advisory board of Milo Cognitive and was a consultant at USC's award-winning game, Pipe Labs. Formerly, she was co-chair of the National Leadership Council of Games for Change and is currently a board member of Hadassah Brandeis Gender Research Institute. She's held a position of independent visiting scholar in the Gender Studies Department at University of Southern California, and she created and taught Spy-Naval Diplomacy, a groundbreaking class that examines the role of gender in espionage, intelligence gathering, and propaganda. And today we're talking about technology for good. And just for fun, just so you know, she makes the world a better place always, but she also loves espressos and martinis. So there's just a little bit of fun in there. I really feel like we could actually do an entire podcast with your entire career, which is so exciting. But what I'm really interested in today for Circle Optics and 360 Pulse is the intersection of technology and empowerment. Mm-hmm. And if you can just talk a little bit about your journey in general, and then we can jump into mentorship.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. You and I have known each other for quite a while, and it's sort of a meeting of the minds every time I get a chance to talk to you. I think technology and empowerment is a really interesting space because so much of technology takes away our agency and at the same time frees us up to create more agency. And I'm a little bit of a skeptic, having photographed originally with film and then going to digital and then seeing how digital manipulation happens and all of that stuff. And then also going from the world of black and white film to color film to now oversaturation and filters and all the other stuff. It's a really interesting space, and I embrace it with a lot of caution, I guess. I think that technology as a whole really can give us so much of freeing us up from, tasks that are mundane and take a lot of our time. But at the same time, I'm concerned that we're losing our cognitive abilities because we're relying on technology so much. And at the end of the day, your empowerment is completely about your ability to harness all that you are. And being all that you are includes your cognitive ability, your emotional ability, your physical ability, your, if you will, your spiritual ability. All those things encompass the whole. And what worries me is as we become more and more and more enamored with technology, especially now with AI, and we have our AI roadmap too for Maestro. But as we become really enamored with technology more and more, I feel like we're going to be giving up a tremendous amount of the things that make us fully human. And by doing that, we're giving up a lot of our empowerment as well. In my conversations about AI, and being focused on the arts, I'm concerned that we're going to only be seeing, AI generated symphonies or AI generated art or AI generated novels or whatever. And that frankly terrifies me because I believe very strongly that creativity is a divine gift. And the more, and we will either use that divine gift for uplifting ways or destructive ways. And what my fear is that relying on technology for the creativity in uplifting way is going to leave us to our devices for the destructive ways. And
well, yeah,
that worries. That scares, frankly, that scares the hell out of me.
I think what I love about you as a change maker, though, is that these concerns always galvanize your leadership. So as the co-founder of the Women's Empowerment Foundation, how do you believe that these immersive technologies can leverage and empower women, and both within the tech industry and at large? So there's definitely the concerns, and we need to make sure that they have a place in the table to do scenarios and also worst case scenarios. I think we tend to glorify things and think of upside mostly and don't talk about downside. But let's talk about some of the levers that you're empowering to deal with some of these issues.
Well, I think with women empowerment specifically, what I think women bring to the table more than, and I'll probably get a lot of pushback on this, but what I think women bring to the table is the human factor. And so in leveraging technology for empowerment, I think that women are never too far away from remembering that it is an emotionally based world, and all decisions at the end of the day have emotion, are driven by emotion. And what I believe very strongly with women empowerment is that for all this time, still we've been told that technology is man's world, and coding is man's world, as we all know isn't true. And I think that what we can do with women empowerment is we can bring the human factor into the conversation, into a position of leadership. Because we already have all the statistics about how, companies with women leaders do better and all of that. And I think the next step for the empowerment of women has to be in the technological space, where all of the statistics about how companies do better with women on the boards and women in positions of leadership, that now has to translate into that Chinese wall, if you will, that gigantic, insurmountable barrier that women need to lead in the tech space. And it's not just pink tech. I'm talking hardcore tech, defense industries, biotech, just all of those places where we traditionally have been kept out. And I think that women being able to lead from the technology space in these areas that have always been off limits to us is going to make a really, really big difference. And I think globally, at the end of the day, the world right now is, I'm old enough to, I taught the Cold War, so I'm old enough to remember, the Cuban Missile Crisis and all of that as a first grader being, taught jump, duck and cover and all the other things. And I think that if technology is going to be used for women empowerment globally, we have to be able to be also the leaders in building peace and using technology for good. And being the guardians, if you will, of that space. And to me, that's the empowerment piece that is missing right now. Mm-hmm. That we need to be the guardians of the technology advances globally to make sure we don't just blow ourselves up.
It's a really great segue. What many people don't realize is that when Zach Niazi founded Circle Optics early on 6 years ago, he actually started it as a B Corp. And there are not a lot of manufacturing and hard tech, deep tech companies that are founded as a B Corp. But that is, we've been getting a lot of DoD funding, and we've been working on a lot of other aspects, but we're right now doing some JTech training and really get into some of the ways that I can actually see are life enhancing. And so it makes me really excited that the JTech project is actually what brought us back together. Uh-huh. And that's a great segue for Maestro. We met about 10 years ago and in, C2 Montreal, uh-huh. And the idea of immersive, that was pretty provocative. And you were, you were in this before it became pop culture. And so that's the point I want to make, is that you were a pioneer in the ways in which this immersive technology could actually make lives better. So I'd love you to talk about Maestro, the genesis and then where it's evolved, please.
Thank you. So Maestro is a social purpose corporation, actually, which is akin to a B Corp. In California, when we were incorporating, when I was incorporating it, was a B Corp didn't technically exist. So it's an SPC, but it's the same in principle. What Maestro is a neuroaesthetic technology company. And I'm eternally grateful to the researchers at Johns Hopkins, Susan Maximum, and Ivy Ross over at Google, because they wrote a book called Your Brain on Art that came out about, I think, 6-7 months ago. And they named the new field neuroaesthetics. And so what Maestro is we sit at the intersection of behavioral health, neuroscience, and the arts. We use music and virtual reality, and we gamify it, and we bring players moments of beauty and joy and awe as a way of countering PTSD and moral injury and burnout and stress. So primarily we're working with first responders because obviously that level of trauma is much higher and the level of burnout. So we're working with healthcare providers, military, law enforcement, and others. Originally, VR I was looking at Microsoft Connect. I was looking at all the different ways in which you can move your arms around, because we need to be able to engage the entire body, the mind, the spirit, the soul, the endocrine system, the autonomic nervous system. We need to engage the entire human. And we want them to be fully immersed. We don't want them to be able to see anything around them. We want to take them completely out of their environment. And that's why we're sticking with VR as opposed to like AR or other ways of doing this. And I am a longtime fanatic about music. So the origin story of Maestro is my late father. Actually, this is his legacy. He was a really, really brilliant guy. He was the proctologist to the stars. He had his JD. He wrote poetry to my mother every day, but at the same time, he was really a train wreck, mentally and physically and emotionally and spiritually, psychologically. He was pretty much on the suicide spectrum my entire life. He was really, really suffering a lot. The two things that kept him alive during his lifetime were being able to see my mother's face every day and classical music, specifically Bach. Bach literally was his God. And so I grew up super privileged in one way. I've been going to the LA Phil since I was 5. Wow. And, I understood back then and understand forever that it's a sacred experience. And being able to watch him struggle, especially in the last 8 years of his life, he was in dialysis and, he didn't want to do it. My mother wouldn't let him go. So he endured 8 years of 3 times a week, 3 hours each time. And the only thing that kept him alive really was listening to his CDs. And when it came time for him to die, I'm the person in charge. And so the dialysis center called me and they said, we can't do anything for him anymore. You need to come home and get him. And so I came and I got him, and we had hospice there, and they had dosed him up on morphine and Ativan and everything. And he was going through the most horrific death throes you can imagine. He was yelling and screaming and kicking, and he was terrified, and my mother was falling apart, and my sister was falling apart, and I'm the one in charge, and I don't know what to do. And literally out of desperation, or you can call it divine inspiration, I picked up my iPhone and I put on the Bach Partita number 3. And in less than a nanosecond, he went from horrific death throes to 100% peaceful. And keeping time with the music, moving his head a little bit, and we kept it going, and that's how he died. For me, it wasn't so much of an aha, because I had been in as a confirmation, because I had been in Rwanda for International Medical Corps right after the genocide, and I had gone to an orphanage where there was an Irish NGO called Concern, and they were working with these kids who were not necessarily catatonic, but who had seen and some had done like really horrific things, and they couldn't get these kids to process. So what they started doing was singing, dancing, and drumming, and it was just revelatory in terms of the impact that it had. So for me, it was like, okay, I'm looking around now. I'm seeing humanity in pain. I'm seeing the arts completely devalued. Like, that's the first program that gets cut, especially in inner city schools, which is just a tragedy. And I get angry about it. And so my point was, okay, like, if I can't just get angry and bitch about it, I need to do something. And, so for Maestro, this is about doing something. And I, as a sole female founder, pretty much with no track record, I set out to create the most powerful strategic partnerships we could for sales, marketing, and distribution and logistics. So we're partnered with Dell Technologies, and they saw potential early on, which is just fantastic. We're partnered with NVIDIA. We're part of the Inception program. We're partnered with an incredible company called Knowledge Bridge International, KBI. So, similarly to you, we're going through, Defense Department and other contracting opportunities because, first responders are suffering. And I also am very focused on not making claims I can't back up. So our first case study was actually with the nurses at Children's Hospital in Orange County. And it started right before the pandemic and went into the pandemic. And we got a terrific set of data from that. We gave them 9 headsets that they rotated just with our demo, not even with our commercial release, just with this harebrained idea that, things would work. And so they put the headsets in oncology and nephrology and surgery. And just over a few months of playing the last Maestro, which is the name of the game, a few times, we got an incredible data set of how much we affected the secondary PTSD and their burnout. And that was published in the Journal of Nursing Administration research issue in May of 2022. So, for us, it was with our demo, and it really put a lot of wind under our sails to be able to say, okay, we have something here, let's move forward. And we had no anticipation whatsoever about the impact of, COVID on all things, mental health, physical, emotional, spiritual. And we're also really thrilled that, so Renee Fleming, the phenomenal soprano, who's by far one of the coolest people I know from Rochester, New York, right? It's one of the coolest.
We have Renee from our Rochester Philharmonic as well, so I'm excited to be able to tag them.
Oh, awesome. So she by far is the coolest person I've ever met.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And so she's a great advocate for us. We're part of the Sound Health Network. We're part of the Neural Arts Blueprint. Every time she's in LA, because she's an advisor to LA Opera. So, I see her a couple times a year. And I'm able to, have a conversation with her where she's always wants to make sure she knows, what we're doing and where we're doing it. And she's just an amazing, amazing advocate for this. What's incredible to us is how much research is being done now about the impact of music, where the NIH, the Kennedy Center, Renee, and the NEA did an incredible workshop in December 14th and 15th last year called Music as Medicine, where they talk about the impact of music on Parkinson's and dementia and Alzheimer's and all of that. So for us, it's, because we're primarily a music company. VR is our delivery system, but we are primarily a music company. And that's part of, I guess, the sacredness of what we're doing is, bringing the arts back in focus, bringing music back into focus, because music, I think, is, in my opinion, is the most powerful of the arts. Yeah. To be able to just cut through everything.
Right.
And that's what we're really, really focused on.
What's so beautiful is that, I think of, math and music are universal because it has the same language, if you will. And so it is kind of a beautiful 360 circle to be able to kind of talk about some of the problems, and that the music brings us together. It brings the generations together. It brings, country versus country, city versus city, the ideas, the music brings us together. It's really, really great. This program is launching at the beginning of Women's History Month. I would love to kind of learn from you, perhaps a mentor or lesson that you learned from a mentor, and then a lesson that you give to young women. So I want to kind of like the perspective of who infused you with great advice, and then what advice do you give other young technologists, if you will?
I think for me, the mentors that I had were actually in the photojournalist space. And one of them was a really, really lovely gentleman named Randy Leffingwell. And he was at the LA Times when I was trying to get to the LA Times. And he's a voracious reader. He's the only person that can sit in the deadline room waiting at the Oscars, waiting for people to come from getting their award and all this chaos around him. And he's immersed in a book, waiting for the next movie star to come in, right? The next, he's got that level of concentration that's mind blowing. But I ran into him one day and I really didn't know him that well. And he was reading The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck. And he just looked at me and said, didn't know me from anyone, right? But it was an intuitive thing. He looked at me and he said, you need to read this book because it's going to determine your life. And I was like, okay, and I read it, and it was so true, because it is about taking the road less traveled, and it is about carving your own way and not listening to people, and not listening to people who are going to tell you to follow the path, right? The beaten path. And in mentoring women, I've been blessed. I've been able to kind of unofficially, semi-officially mentor some of the students that we taught, things like that, during the spy novel thing. And what I encourage them to do is not to fall into the feminist tropes, not to fall into the ruling out everything because it goes against conventional wisdom. Mm-hmm. Teaching spy novels from a gender lens in one of the most misogynist periods of life, which would be, starting with like James Bond and, stuff like that, is being able to have that level of a discernment of not throwing everything out just because it goes against what people are shouting about. And you've got to be able to craft your own way. You've got to be able to understand that it is the road less traveled. It is, how do I find what resonates for me that may not be as widely accepted, if you will, as for others. I think that really is the most important thing. And to also just go for it. It took me 7 times to get to the LA Times. And I literally just happened to be at the right place at the right time, walking down the hallway for something completely different when, the photo editor who had previously said no 6 times said, "Oh, wait, are you available? Because I'm one person down. Can you go shoot this, come back and show me your portfolio?" And it's literally like that.
Yeah.
I think where I wrestle with, and I'm being a complete hypocrite here, because I wrestle with being a raging control freak, but every time I get out of my own way, magic happens. And I think as women, we're taught that we have to grab on super tight, that we have to hold on to something and grab onto it. And sometimes that's not the case. So I also, besides taking the road less traveled and carving your own path, it's also about don't grip it so tightly, because if you do, you're not going to be able to see magic when it happens.
Wow. That's amazing. So what I'm kind of feeling right now is 3 distinct words. I am feeling autonomy, courage, and impact. You have been listening to Yael Swerdlow, CEO and founder of Maestro. And in our blog, I will certainly include all the links so that you can too find out where you can actually test or see the progress that she's making. And I am now going to order both books that you mentioned. We have a Circle Optics library. Anytime that we have a guest that suggests some books for us, we throw it in, and I will be posting about those as well. Thank you for joining us. I also want to make sure that I acknowledge my producer, Scott Fitzgerald, at Rockfox Studios in the heart of Rochester, New York, the epicenter of optics. And would love all of you listening, please connect with us, subscribe to our program, find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. We're very interested in how immersive technology positively impacts safety and human connection that we've been talking about today. And if you know a story or a guest we should feature, please let me know. You can reach me at Jennifer@Circle Optics. Thank you.